Hey there, everyone. A good morning to you. I'm Errol Barnett in for Vladimir Duthier. At this moment, we are watching news taking place all around the U.S. and the world. It's a somber day in Israel as Hamas releases the bodies of the youngest and oldest hostages. We will take you there live as more captives are set to be freed in the coming days. Plus, President Trump doubles down on his criticism of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. His remarks now sending shockwaves all around the world. We're tracking the impact and the fallout. And what comes next for the nation's first of its kind congestion pricing after President Trump pulled the plug on New York City's plan. This is CBS News 24/7. All right, let's begin this morning in the Middle East. It is where Hamas has, for the first time, released the bodies of deceased Israeli hostages. The remains are believed to be that of Shiri Bibas and her two children, Ariel and Kiffer, as well as Oded Lifshitz. All were kidnapped on October 7th of 2023. For more on this, let's bring in CBS News foreign correspondent Deborah Patter. Joins us now from Jerusalem. Deborah, talk to us about this handover. We've seen footage of the bodies being moved through Israel. What's happening at this stage?
Well, you know, as you said, a very somber day here, reflected in the grim weather as well for Israel. For the past 5 weeks, Errol, the images of the Red Cross in Gaza waiting for a hostage exchange have been really a sign of hope. Captives taken by Hamas on the 7th of October released alive after more than 15 months in captivity. But today, there was no cause for celebration. Hamas released the bodies of those 4 captives, Oded Lifshitz and the Bibas family, as you mentioned, Shiri and her 2 young boys. Now, Hamas claims that the Bibas trio were killed during an Israeli air raid early in the first 2 months of this war. Lifshitz has been identified by Israel, but relatives of the Bibas family still await official confirmation. The Bibas siblings have really become a rallying symbol in this country. Their father, Yarden, was taken captive separately and released alive in a previous exchange. So one can imagine this is a pretty tough day for him as they wait for the results of those DNA tests by Israel on the bodies. Errol?
Yeah, Deborah, and there seems to be 2 sides of this. You know, some sense of positivity that this ceasefire and hostage release deal is continuing, but it is jarring to see these images of children, these babies, and their bodies being returned. What is the reaction overall in Israel?
Well, you know, the next 10 days will see the final stages of phase 1 of the Gaza ceasefire deal. And this really is the first time the bodies of hostages abducted by Hamas have been released. So it's a very rough day for the country and one that has turned really into a spontaneous day of mourning. Even musicians have cancelled concerts out of respect for the dead. The Bibas family were from the Nir Oz kibbutz, and this morning survivors from that kibbutz stood under umbrellas in the rain along the roads where the vehicles transporting those coffins passed by. Oded Lifshitz was also from that kibbutz. He was 83, 84 now, killed in Gaza. When he was taken hostage, though, he was still 83. A former journalist and known really as a lifelong peace activist. So that community is in deep mourning.
And this is part of phase 1, Deborah, but where do things stand as far as getting closer to the next phase, phase 2?
Well, the next phase is going to be a lot harder, Errol. Israeli officials say negotiation for the second stage will commence in the coming days. They haven't yet started. Now, if all the hostages expected to be freed in phase 1 are released as planned, then there would be over 50 hostages left in Gaza. The Israeli government has already said at least 35 of those are dead. Now, this week, one Hamas commander said in a statement that they're prepared to release all the remaining hostages in one go in exchange for a permanent truce and a full withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza. Israel, on the other hand, has said they will demand a complete demilitarization of Gaza and will not accept a Hamas presence there. And of course, in the middle of this are the people caught on both sides of this conflict. Palestinians who have endured a punishing war for 15 months say they cannot go back to that. And the families of the remaining hostages who are still waiting for those who are inside Gaza waiting for their loved ones, say negotiations cannot stop now. Yael Alexander, the mother of one of those hostages, Idan, believed to be the last living American captive, spoke to us, and she had this message for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying, imagine if it was your son alive in Gaza waiting to be released. You need to bring everyone home now. Errol?
Deborah Patter joining us live from Jerusalem. Deb, we always appreciate your reporting. Thank you. And among those waiting for their relatives to return is Alana Zaitchik. 6 of her family members were taken hostage on October 7th, and they've all been released except for one, her cousin's husband, David Cuneo, who still remains in captivity. I spoke with Alana earlier on the CBS Morning News.
Some of my family members were in tunnels. Some of them were in a house and then a hospital. One of the children was held by herself for 10 days in the beginning, one of the 3-year-old twins. So it's a horror show to be held in captivity. David, we just actually received a sign of life from a returned hostage who was free, who told us that they saw him recently alive. So this has filled my family with a strength that we didn't have before, knowing that he's recently been seen alive. Until every single hostage is home, I don't think the healing can actually begin. The children have nightmares. My cousin has PTSD flashbacks of terrorists outside the house. And, there's no scenario in which the healing begins until every single hostage is home.
And we so appreciate Alana speaking with CBS News. She also said she and her family hope David will be released during phase 2 of the ceasefire deal. We will, of course, keep you posted. All right, I think we've got some live pictures for you from Oxon Hill, Maryland. This is where the Conservative Political Action Conference, or CPAC as you know it, is being held. We're just moments away from Vice President J.D. Vance giving remarks on this stage. Let's bring in CBS News White House reporter Aaron Navarro. He's at the event. And Aaron, what should we expect from the Vice President's remarks this morning? This will be a crowd of the faithful and people who really support President Trump and his agenda.
Errol, good to be with you. Yeah, as you mentioned, you can see the crowd start to trickle in before Vice President Vance has a conversation with Mercedes Schlapp, the wife of Matt Schlapp, who is the chairman of CPAC. A source familiar tells CBS News that Vice President Vance is expected to talk about just the first month of the Trump administration, really focusing on the Trump administration's efforts to deport undocumented migrants with criminal records, unquote, unleashing American energy and promoting domestic manufacturing, which is the big argument behind a lot of the tariffs that President Trump has proposed. One thing I will be watching out for, though, is Vice President Vance going to talk about Ukraine and Russia? Yesterday, he said in interviews with print outlets that Zelenskyy was, quote, bad-mouthing Trump and that he will come to regret it. We'll see if Vice President Vance continues that rhetoric on stage in 10 or so minutes.
The Republicans on Capitol Hill have the White House, both chambers of Congress. This is a celebration of conservative values. I'm wondering, though, if there might be any difference of the tone in this year's conference compared to years past. How are you seeing it so far?
Yeah, I think you got at it. This is more of a victory lap, more of a celebration. In years past, there was a lot of sense of anger towards the Biden administration, towards Democrats in control. That's not the case this time. 1 month into the Trump administration, 1 month into Republican control of this Congress, was certainly expecting to hear more of an optimistic view on how President Trump is carrying out the ideals that conservatives want.
All right, Aaron Navarro joining us live from Maryland. Aaron, thanks. Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelenskyy has met with U.S. officials 1 day now after, you could call it a war of words, escalated with President Trump. Yesterday, the president described Zelenskyy as a dictator, accusing him of duping America into providing billions of dollars in assistance.
A dictator without elections. Zelenskyy better move fast or he's not going to have a country left. Got to move fast because that war is going in the wrong direction.
CBS News senior foreign correspondent Elizabeth Palmer joins us now live from London with more on this. Liz, Zelenskyy says he's supposed to meet with Trump's special envoy to Ukraine and Russia in Kyiv today. And I believe we're just learning there's a planned press conference that has been canceled per a U.S. request. This is according to Kyiv. Bring us up to speed on these latest developments.
Well, retired General Keith Kellogg has been there. He arrived yesterday and has been there today. We have no idea what they've discussed or even who was present at the meetings. General Kellogg went in with a fairly dovish position. He said, I'm going to listen. I do recognize that Ukraine wants security guarantees that will be written into a peace agreement. So very much in contrast to what we've been hearing from President Trump. Why the press conference today was canceled is anybody's guess. Look, it could be that there's just nothing to report. They haven't been able to come to any constructive agreement. But equally, it could be that General Kellogg is trying to keep his head below the parapet while these furious salvos are issuing from President Trump in America. And he doesn't want to say anything to inflame the president even further.
We were just looking at some live pictures of Zelenskyy meeting with the U.S. envoy. We just lost some of it as we were chatting with you, Liz, but all of this happening in real time. And President Trump is warning Zelenskyy to, quote, move fast toward reaching a deal. I'm wondering how President Zelenskyy is responding and reacting to what is a sharp turn in U.S. policy toward Ukraine.
It's hard to imagine. He must be reeling because this came from nowhere, apparently. All the analysts say that speed is going to play into Russia's hands, that a really well-crafted peace agreement should have Ukraine at the table, and it will be complex, and it will take time. And in fact, the Russians have signaled that. They're saying, oh, you know, this is going to take some time, it's going to take some setup, and so on. When President Trump says Ukrainian President Zelenskyy has to move fast, it's not clear what he's talking about. I mean, Zelenskyy has been sidelined, so what he's supposed to do quickly, anybody's guess.
I want to quickly ask you about Germany's Chancellor Olaf Scholz reacting to Trump's comments, calling them dangerous. Germany is Europe's largest economy. You know, Scholz incredibly influential in what happens. What do you make of that?
Well, I think he's referring to the fact that President Trump called President Zelenskyy a dictator. And unjustly, because it's true, Ukraine didn't have elections when it was meant to last May, but can you imagine holding elections under these circumstances in the middle of a war with millions of people outside the country? The country is under martial law, and under Ukrainian law, if there is martial law, there are no elections. So he was perfectly correct in not holding the election last spring. That's not to say he isn't a leader with huge credibility. And I think the Germans are getting at the fact that this is the wrong time to erode President Zelenskyy's standing internationally by calling him a dictator and erode his credibility with his own people, because he's in a tight spot. And he is going to be going into negotiations and asking Ukrainians for compromise. He needs all the credibility he can get right now, not being, you know, splattered with unjust insults, unjust and unmerited insults.
Yeah, uncharted territory here for all involved. Liz Palmer, great to have you with us, joining us from our London bureau. Snowfall records, they're officially being broken as, take a look at this, major winter storms slam mid-Atlantic states with nearly a foot of snow overnight. And it comes as parts of the eastern U.S. remain in a deep freeze with historic lows expected from the Central Plains to the Gulf Coast. CBS News national correspondent Dave Malkoff continues to brave it out in Virginia Beach this morning. Dave, you are up to your knees in it. Pretty historic situation where you are. Help us understand what's happening.
Errol, and you need to understand what this is. This is snand. It is a combination between snow and sand. As I walk over here, you can see the piles of this mixed together. And when the snow and the sand mixes together, well, the sand becomes almost like a concrete. It's hard to dig into. But you've got it. You've got sand here on the beach, and you've got the snow on top of it. Let me take you up to the drone so you can see a higher perspective of, look at all this. It's unbelievable to locals and also to people who are just coming here to visit. And Errol, this is happened in the past, but only about less than 10 times. And those records, Errol, go back to the post-Civil War era. So you've got several times that's happened in the past, but it is very, very rare.
Dave, we appreciate you showing us something I've never seen before, SNAND there in Virginia. Thanks so much. Let's quickly cross over to CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore. I don't know how much SNAND you've ever seen. You've got our national forecast. How much of that is coming?
Look, all of the snow across the country, most of it fell in that southeastern Virginia area. Of course, the mountains might get a little bit out in the west, but you're talking about East Coast snow. That's a lot of snow, and many of those places seeing a lot of snow, more than what they are used to by any means. All right, here's some of those totals. Greenbrier, Virginia, 12.5 inches of snow. Sigma saw about 12.4. Gallup's Corner around a foot of snow in southeastern Virginia. It's crazy. So that snow is going to take a little while to melt. We do have a little bit of light snow showers moving through portions of central Virginia, central North Carolina, even up into Pennsylvania as an upper level low pressure system is moving through. Minimal snow accumulations from that. Yes, the Arctic freeze remains across much of the central United States. Places up towards Wichita looking at high temperatures only at 15 degrees today, but that will begin to retreat back to the north as we go through Friday into Saturday. Storm systems actually relatively calm across the country as we go into tomorrow afternoon, with high temperatures beginning to warm back up across the eastern half of the United States as we go into the weekend. Errol, for now, back over to you.
Will be welcomed in so many places. Grant, thanks. We'll see you later this hour.
Yeah.
The string of recent plane accidents is unsurprisingly fueling concerns about air safety. But coming up next, we will hear from Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy and why he says all you travelers out there should not be afraid. You're in the right place. Streaming CBS News 24/7. Check this out. Delta Airlines is offering to pay out the passengers who were on the flight that crashed in Toronto, right? The aircraft flipped. 21 people were injured, and just this morning, the final passenger was released from the hospital. Miraculously, all 80 passengers survived the crash landing. Well, now Delta is offering $30,000 to all the passengers who were on board during the incident, and a spokesperson for Delta insists, quote, "This gesture has no strings attached and does not affect rights," end quote, which means passengers can still sue for damages. And in the wake of that incident and the alarming string of recent plane incidents we've been reporting on, it's not surprising that some are feeling anxious about getting on aircraft. Well, our Chris Van Cleve sat down with the new Secretary of Transportation to discuss that.
Is it safe to fly?
So the simple answer is yes, it's safe to fly, of course. Actually, I'm going to fly later today. I've been flying for the last week.
On his first full day as Transportation Secretary, Sean Duffy faced the deadliest U.S. aviation accident in more than 20 years, the mid-air collision over Washington that killed 67 people. It was the first of several high-profile crashes that have stunned Americans, including this Delta flight that crash-landed in Toronto Monday. All 80 on board survived.
If you get in a plane, if you look at how many people fly, how many flights we have, of course it's a safe space.
And yet we've had these 5 real high-profile incidents in the last 3 weeks. It leaves people wondering what is going on.
Each one is very unique. And I do think as we look at the incidents or the crashes, it gives us an opportunity to say, what went wrong? What can we improve upon in the system off these crashes?
Improving the nation's air traffic control system is now a priority for Duffy.
The systems that we use are so old. We should be the envy of the world. But that we have systems across our network that are run on floppy disks.
So how do you get that package of upgrades actually done and implemented?
If we're going to do this, I need the Congress to move fast with us. We can't wait 4 years, 6 years, 10 years. We have to do it right now.
He's enlisted the help of Elon Musk, owner of rocket and spacecraft builder SpaceX.
SpaceX has some of the brightest minds working for them. So I've asked some of his bright minds at SpaceX to come in and say, listen, what do you see are some simple, easy steps that we can take to upgrade our system?
How do you avoid the potential conflicts of interest with Elon Musk?
I don't want to see conflicts of interest. So he was talking to air traffic controllers, didn't plug into the system, but looked at the technology that they use, asked them, had a back and forth about what works well for you, what doesn't work well.
Democratic lawmakers are demanding answers over Duffy's decision to lay off hundreds of FAA employees in the midst of the recent accidents.
All the critical safety positions like air traffic controllers and inspectors, all of those positions have been protected. No one's been fired. Actually, we're hiring into those spaces. So 352 cuts is 0.8% of the workforce. Incredibly small.
Will there be future rounds of cuts?
There could be. I'm not sure at the FAA, but I think across government.
Because of the ongoing crash investigations, the secretary couldn't speak specifically about individual accidents, but says they are watching those investigations as updates come in. He says the Department of Transportation and FAA will move to make changes to make flying even safer. Chris Van Cleve, CBS News, Washington's Reagan National Airport.
Right now, New York Governor Kathy Hochul is promising to fight back after the Trump administration slammed the brakes on New York City's congestion pricing. Now, the plan rolled out last month and has been charging drivers as much as $9 extra to access some parts of Manhattan. I want to bring in CBS News New York reporter Elijah Westbrook with more on this. Elijah, what was the main reason for the DOT's sudden termination of this plan? We all saw that pretty stern message from President Trump.
That's right. Good morning, Errol, and great to be with you. I'm going to start by talking about what Secretary of Transportation Sean Duffy had to say. And he released this letter to New York Governor Kathy Hochul just yesterday afternoon, citing a slew of reasons as to why this decision was made. He says that congestion pricing ultimately is harmful to business owners who have their businesses set up in this portion of Manhattan. He also mentions the fact that drivers already pay their fair share of taxes, that where the money goes towards improving the roadways. Keep in mind that congestion pricing was enacted technically under the Biden administration following years of legal hurdles and steps just to get to this point. And the program has only been in operation for nearly 2 months at this point.
This has been controversial in New York. We know New Jersey's governor is against the congestion pricing. So now, how are New York officials planning to challenge this termination in court now that the federal government is stepping in and trying to, have its way?
Yeah, it's certainly a great question, and one that we received a little bit of intel into as of about a few hours ago. So the MTA chairman and CEO, Jana Lieber, talked about that process, and he says that right now the agency is back in court. It filed a complaint with the federal government, specifically against the Department of Transportation, to see if there's a way to uproot this decision. Again, I mean, we're talking about years of studies and surveys that were conducted, open houses where people were able to come in and voice their concerns about this. And although this was a controversial program, given the fact that people have to pay $9 at least to enter this central business district, a lot now has to be looked at as we proceed forward.
And it's just notable to me, Elijah, that as you stand in central Manhattan, the traffic isn't gridlock. Traffic is moving, and that's with congestion pricing in place. We'll see what happens next. Elijah, great to have you reporting. Thanks so much. A federal judge holds off on deciding whether or not to drop the corruption charges against New York City Mayor Eric Adams. For now, we'll discuss what happened during yesterday's court hearing and what this means for the Justice Department's efforts to get this case dismissed. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Welcome back. We are taking you now to Miramar, Florida. Police there are investigating a hazmat situation at a U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement office. Our signal with CBS News Miami is coming in and out, but we want to connect you with that coverage briefly so we can hear what they're reporting on.
Again, not the entire building as a result of this investigation. We know that hazmat teams, they've also been called out to this as well. Because right now, these crews want to figure out exactly what substance, what kind of powder this was that was possibly brought in by this package, by this person who is now still inside that building. So at this point, we just understand at least one person that came in contact with that package started feeling a little bit sick, a little bit ill after this. We're told this was a security officer there inside of that building. And take a look at some of the people that you see there lined up right along the sidewalk. Looks like just outside of the parking lot there. Again, because we know that a portion of this building now has been evacuated. So these folks possibly who work inside, they're not able to return back.
Just to summarize what we've been hearing, a security officer at an immigration and customs facility in Miramar, Florida, appears to be unwell after potentially coming in contact with a suspicious package. There are hazmat crews there. People have been evacuated. Our CBS News Miami station will continue covering this, and we will bring you updates as they come in. All right, now to this. A federal judge has yet to decide whether to accept the Justice Department's request to drop corruption charges against New York City Mayor Eric Adams. Now, the mayor was in court yesterday for the hearing, and he told the judge he did not commit a crime. But critics are calling this a quid pro quo deal between Adams and President Trump. CBS News Department of Justice correspondent Scott MacFarlane joins us now here in Studio 55 to talk about what happened in the courtroom yesterday. You were there, no cameras allowed, so you're really giving us the color and the atmosphere inside. What was the mayor's demeanor and what happened?
This is an off-Broadway cliffhanger. That's what this is. This federal courthouse in Manhattan had a drama yesterday, and they didn't resolve it before the show ended. The federal judge could decide today whether to allow the dismissal of Eric Adams' case, but the mayor was there, swore an oath, and denied these accusations, Errol, that there was some quid pro quo to get this case dropped, that he offered something to Trump for Trump to have his Justice Department drop the case. That's at the heart of this whole dispute. Did they offer something in return improperly? What's more, the Department of Justice acknowledged under questioning in the courtroom that they can, if they want to, bring this case back in the future. They're not going to drop it for good. That sort of Damocles over the mayor's head troubles an awful lot of people, that kind of leverage should not be given to the White House in any of these cases.
And it certainly gives the appearance that there is leverage over the mayor if he does or does not comply with what the White House wants. Judge Ho is presiding over this. Give us a sense about who he is and what his options are.
He's a new federal judge who was appointed in 2023 by then President Obama, has a background with the ACLU. He handled this case over the course of 90 minutes without pressing too hard on either side. He was feeling them both out and acknowledged this is unprecedented. This type of dispute has not come before the courts before. So he said he didn't want to shoot from the hip and rule immediately. But he also acknowledged, Errol, there's a time sensitivity to all of this because the mayor's up for re-election. This is a public corruption case. So we expect a ruling in a matter of days, not weeks.
All right, we'll watch that closely. And you cannot escape Washington completely, Scott. You try to escape up here to New York to cover this. We know Senate leaders on Capitol Hill are voting on whether to confirm Kash Patel as FBI director. Could this set a precedent for what the future justice system could look like under President Trump, considering what Patel has said about the FBI, about investigators as it relates to all sorts of things, including January 6th?
On any other day, what an enormous story. But mid-afternoon today, we expect the next director of the FBI to be confirmed, and he's a Trump loyalist. That is bonkers in the worlds of the FBI, where you're supposed to have independence from any political actor, including the White House. Kash Patel wrote a book in which he had a bit of an enemies list. He's pledged prosecutions of the media and political figures before he was a nominee to be the FBI director. He was questioned about that at confirmation hearings and said he will be an independent voice inside the FBI. Democrats say he is a stalking horse for Donald Trump inside an agency that needs to be independent. But that said, Errol, there's been no galvanized opposition from Republicans to this confirmation. It looks like a sure shot with Kash Patel taking over the Bureau potentially in a matter of hours.
And we remember President Trump as a candidate all the way back in 2016, criticizing the FBI for the so-called Russia collusion case and so many others. We'll see how this unfolds. Scott, great to see you.
Likewise.
Thanks for coming up. For more on this, let's bring in CBS News congressional reporter Torian Small. You see him there live on Capitol Hill. Torian, Senator Mitch McConnell, surprising many, was the only Republican to vote against the president's cabinet pick at their confirmation hearing recently, HHS Secretary RFK Jr. Any sense that we could see other Republicans go against the party in voting against Patel as McConnell did previously?
Yeah, it's unclear right now. The usual suspects, so the Lisa Murkowskis of Alaska and Susan Collins of Maine, and of course, Mitch McConnell, haven't quite yet telegraphed where their vote lies. McConnell, though, is an interesting one because he did vote for the procedural motion, which was to close the vote and start the proceedings to an eventual floor vote. But that doesn't necessarily mean that his vote will stand on the side of Patel. Look, it's been clear that McConnell is willing to break from the party in order to buck Donald Trump's more controversial picks, but it's been pretty futile effort so far, considering there hasn't been the math on Democrats' side in order to block these confirmations. We're seeing Democrats, though, come out still looking to press Republicans about Patel. Just in a press conference today, the ranking member on the Senate Judiciary, Dick Durbin, came out and laid out the case again as this vote is quite imminent. Take a listen.
We stand outside the building that Mr. Patel on one day plans to, quote, shut down and reopen the next day as a museum of the deep state. That is one of many of the bizarre political statements made by the man who is asking for 10 years as director of the FBI. After meeting with Mr. Patel and reviewing his record, questioning him at the hearing, I'm convinced he's neither the experience, the judgment, nor the temperament to lead the FBI.
You saw a walk in the background there, Richard Blumenthal, another Democrat, a part of the judiciary, who's been a part of this effort, this nonstop effort to slow down this process when it comes to Patel. They sent letters to the Department of Justice asking for clarification about anonymous tips that they received from whistleblowers about Patel's previous stints within the federal law enforcement agencies. But I asked Blumenthal not too long ago about what's the plan here. It's clear that Democrats won't be able to stop him. He said moving forward with these controversial picks, they just want to speak directly to Americans and outline exactly who Donald Trump is installing into these very crucial departments, Errol.
And Torian, I know we just got an update on today's vote concerning the nomination of former World Wrestling executive Linda McMahon. She's up for Education Secretary. What's the latest on that?
Yeah, the committee voted out her down party lines to send her to the floor for a full vote. That was, of course, Republicans with 12 votes there deciding that she is qualified, according to this panel, in order to lead the Department of Education, despite having not too much experience in the education world. She's known for her involvement in sports entertainment, like you said, former owner of World Wrestling Entertainment. And she's also a staunch Trump loyalist. She's been a mega donor to Trump's campaign, both in 2016 and in 2020 and 2024. So this is her now next stop to the floor vote, where she's likely to get the majority of support again to make it past the finish line. The biggest concern that we're hearing from Democrats is the fact that she's willing to placate Donald Trump's efforts to dismantle the Department of Education. She was asked about this during her confirmation hearing, what that would look like. She said, although the president has already started efforts to go down that road, she'll be willing to work with the Senate in order to do it through Congress as they ultimately hold the purse, Errol.
President Trump getting most of his cabinet selections confirmed. All right, Torian Small, thank you for that, live from Capitol Hill. The polar vortex we've been reporting on is reaching its peak today. More than 50 cities could see record-breaking cold temperatures, basically everywhere that you're seeing highlighted on this map. CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore has another look at the national weather forecast. I'm imagining with a lot of white and blue in there, Grant.
That's the color of the season, isn't it, Errol? And all this Arctic air that's been in place across the central and eastern half of the United States was really what allowed for the storm system that's just beginning to exit the East Coast to have the cold air in place to produce all of the snow. Just a couple of light snow showers moving through the eastern half of the United States, out of the Midwestern states now up into the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast. But it was all the snow that came from the low pressure system that's now offshore that's produced all of this snow. Greenbrier, Virginia, near Norfolk there, 12.5 inches of snow. Sigma, Virginia, 12.4, all the way down the list. Norfolk International reporting 11.5 inches of snow. It's crazy how much snow is now on the ground. But like you mentioned, you've got this Arctic air that's in place, and that Arctic air is peaking today, but it's still influencing a huge number of people, over 100 million people underneath either extreme cold warnings or cold weather advisories, which is that lighter blue color. And you're talking about places dealing with temperatures that are 20 to nearly 30 degrees colder than normal. Record breaking, and many of you are waking up with temperatures in the single digits. Even look at Kansas City. The actual temperature is 3 degrees below zero. You factor in just a 5 to 10 mile per hour wind, and it feels like 15 degrees below zero. So this Arctic air will begin to retreat back to the north as we go through the next couple of days. But you're still talking about the potential for record cold high temperatures today. Kansas City looking at 14. St. Louis, a high of 17. The record coldest for today's day is 18 degrees. Oklahoma City, a high of 20. Even places like Asheville, North Carolina, getting into some of that Arctic air with highs around 25 degrees. The record cold high temperature for today is 26. Again, that cold air begins to retreat back to north. Temperatures like Williston looking at highs back above freezing by tomorrow afternoon. Minneapolis looking at highs near 34 as we go into Friday. Back to you.
Wow, back above freezing is good news. Look, drive carefully and check on your pets. They're not going to survive this stuff outside. Bring them inside, folks. Grant Gilmore, we appreciate the update. Thanks so much. Next, we're going to take you live to Rome for the very latest on from the Vatican on the Pope's health. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Welcome back. At this moment, Vice President J.D. Vance is addressing the topic of Ukraine and the largest threats to Europe at CPAC.
You've had the leaders of the West decide that they should send millions and millions of unvetted foreign migrants into their countries. That is the biggest threat to Europe. And frankly, it remains, by the way, the biggest threat to the United States because, yes, we've got 4 years of President Trump's leadership, but I guarantee you, if the Democrats ever get power again, they're going to try to do it again. We cannot rebuild Western civilization. We cannot rebuild the United States of America or Europe by letting millions and millions of unvetted illegal migrants come into our country. It has to stop. Thank God it stopped here, but it's got to stop there. And a related issue, Mercedes, is...
That's just a sampling of what the vice president is saying at this moment. President Trump is set to speak at CPAC on Saturday, and we've also just learned that Elon Musk will address the conference today. Of course, we'll have much more coverage of that and other events at this gathering throughout the day. Pope Francis has now been in the hospital for a full week as of today. The first encouraging update from the Vatican came just last night in the way of what they describe as a slight improvement in his blood testing. CBS News senior foreign correspondent Seth Doan is live from Rome, just outside the specialized hospital unit once again, Seth, where the Pope is being treated. Give us the latest update on his condition and how the Vatican is characterizing this health incident.
Errol, I decided to keep out my phone so I could read to you the updates that we're getting, so you could get a sense of how little we're hearing each day. I'm translating from Italian. The update yesterday said the Pope passed a tranquil evening. He woke up and had breakfast. Today's update was the night was a serene night. The Holy Father got up and did breakfast in a chair. And that's what we've heard so far today. So it's really bits and pieces of information that is coming from the Vatican. Most of the medical news comes out in the evening from the hospital, but even that is we're really having to kind of read between the lines. They're saying very little. There was a slight improvement, though, as you mentioned, coming to me in the blood tests, specifically the indices that look at inflammation in the Pope's blood. And so that was a turn a little bit more positive last night. Of course, 2 nights ago, we had that news that no one wanted to hear about having pneumonia in both lungs. So bits and pieces of information coming out here out of Gemelli Hospital, where the Pope is being treated in a special wing, his own papal suite.
You know, there are millions of people who are hanging on your every word, the Vatican's every word, because, you know, an ailing pope is very troubling for so many. What is the atmosphere like if you've been able to see and get some reporting out of Vatican City, and then separately where you are, where the pope is physically in his hospital bed?
It's interesting because the Pope is being treated here. The world's attention is on this building. He's up in a set of rooms, a suite above me. But if you walk in right behind me there, it's business as usual. The restaurant's busy, the bar, the coffee shop is busy, and there are regular people being treated, going to the emergency room. It is a hospital that continues to operate as normal. But in front, you're starting to see people come up and they're putting little cards, making prayers. Also for people who are going through treatment here at this hospital. You're hearing the same thing around churches across Rome, where people are praying for the health of this Pope. And one thing the Vatican is putting out, which has been kind of interesting to see, is messages of support going to Pope Francis. Specifically, they gave us a couple of images of letters that he'd received from kids in the oncology unit, the pediatric oncology unit here, who were drawing, who were sending drawings, who were sending notes of well wishes, letters written in Italian, hoping that the Pope has a speedy recovery. So certainly people are sending their best wishes and hoping for exactly that. Meanwhile, we're hearing in the press, not directly from the Vatican, but among doctors who have been interviewed, that any recovery from something so serious would take, we're talking about at least a week. But that is not official. That's just what the doctors are saying for recovering from a double lung pneumonia in both lungs.
Right, yeah, he is a man in his 80s. Seth Doan, great to have you connect with us with the latest on Pope Francis's health. All right, we have much more news ahead. Do stay with us. You're already in the right place, streaming CBS News 24/7. A court found former Spanish Soccer Federation president Luis Rubiales guilty of sexually assaulting soccer player Jenny Hermoso. As you may recall, Rubiales kissed her without consent during the celebration of Spain's Women's World Cup victory in 2023. Rubiales will not face jail time and was ordered to pay a fine of more than 10,000 euros. It's about $10,500. Fresh off the hit movie musical Wicked, Cynthia Erivo has just been picked to host the Tony Awards this year. The nominations will be announced May 1st, and you can catch the Tonys on Sunday, June 8th on CBS and Paramount+. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with a look at the national weather forecast. I don't know if you've heard that Wicked song, Grant, but it's quite popular. I think they're onto something.
It's kind of a catchy tune, right? I think they have a good chance of picking up a few awards. Right, yeah. Oh, man, and certainly you've heard a lot of it this winter with just being kind of locked in with the cold temperatures outside, probably listening to a lot of music, thinking about warmer days ahead. That Arctic air is still in place across the central United States. Many of you waking up with temperatures below zero. Of course, the wind chills are well below zero. This Arctic blast will finally begin to retreat as that Arctic air goes back to the north. Many across the central United States running 15 to 20, even 30 degrees colder than normal in some places. The snowstorm that was across the mid-Atlantic, that's moving out over the Atlantic Ocean right now. Some trailing snow showers for the Ohio Valley up into the northeast today. But much of the United States, a lot calmer than it has been over the last couple of weeks. You see temperatures across the central United States tomorrow in the middle and upper 20s with even more moderate and mild temperatures as we go into the weekend. Errol, back to you.
Can't wait for it, Grant. Thanks so much. That's it for me. Stay right where you are. Catch me on the CBS Morning News at 7 a.m. After the break, Mugo Odigwe is live from San Francisco with all your breaking news from coast to coast. CBS News 24/7.